give thanks to God and honor him as God,
Yeah.
but you refuse to do that, and there has been this exchange. That's the Romans 1:18 language of the exchange of the truth for a lie. And that lie is multifaceted,
Yes.
as man's experience demonstrates.
That's
We'll
right.
have to deal with Romans 1 here in a few minutes when he says it has nothing to do with atheists, but it actually has to do with all humanity. But it seems that the idea is, well, what you all are saying is that people have this absolute clarity that Yahweh is the one true God, and they're just simply suppressing that. And they simplify it down rather than, again, I have to deal with apologetics with Muslims. I'm dealing with people who are theists. They believe in one God, the creator of all things.
Yeah.
And yet there is still an fundamental element of suppression
Yeah.
in dealing with that, especially when it comes to their denial of original sin and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So you can simplify it for the sake of trying to make an argument, but we're not the ones doing the simplification.
Yeah. The point is self-deception.
Oh, yeah.
We're self-deceived. Our sin has corrupted our reasoning faculties, and Romans 1 is not simply, like you said, about just atheists. We're not saying there's the atheist text. That's the humanity text. That's our experience.
As we will see.
Yeah, and that's what we go off into all kinds of different religions, and we pursue all kinds of different gods, and unbelievers have a way that Romans 1 works out in their life, but it's not the whole thing.
Right, definitely.
Apologetic method ought to be to assume God's existence and Christ's triumph and show that the atheist lives in a kind of absurd way without believing in Christianity. They sort of pop their head into Francis Schaeffer's upper story. And so these verses that we're going to be talking about will sort of form the basis for those dangerous and almost certainly false beliefs. In your video entitled Street Level Apologetics, you point out that 1 Peter 3:15 begins with the words, "But in your heart sanctify Christ as Lord." And it then continues with the famous piece that everyone remembers, "And always be prepared to articulate a defense to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have with gentleness and respect." Now to you, the early part of this verse means something particular. That part at the beginning about sanctifying Christ as Lord will in essence dictate the sort of apologetic approach that you feel is biblical. And what I want to argue is that it's ultimately that apologetic approach that turns people away from the gospel. It sullies your message in a way that I hope matters to you. And this is sort of a...
Now, I just have to stop. I want to let him do his whole 1 Peter 3 thing, then we'll take it apart exegetically. But sadly, there is a consistency here on his part of the evidential apologist, which again sullies. These are not. This is not language of an agnostic. Okay, this is not. I've never had an agnostic come up to me and say you're sully. You know, that then assumes a standard that they don't actually believe exists in the first place. But it's very pragmatic, very, very pragmatic. Clearly, once again, if you believe God is accomplishing his will in this world, if you believe he has an elect people, if you believe that the Spirit of God is the only one that can take out a heart of stone and give a heart of flesh, raise people to spiritual life, this type of pragmatic theology has no place. So it would seem to me that if this reflects at least the theology that he once held but no longer holds, because I can't place it anyplace else. There's no connection to an agnostic here.
Right.
Then you would have a very sub-biblical theology, which he evidently, though not holding to it anymore, is still in some way connected to.
He can't quite shake his Christianity.
Can't quite get rid of it, I guess, yeah.
No, but I find it interesting that the emphasis you choose to place on this verse is the part about sanctification and not the part about having a demeanor of gentleness and respect when defending your faith. And this will clearly be reflected in many of your street apologetics videos, where you interact with people extemporaneously, like the one that you have that mocks transgendered people by comparing them to a man in a dog outfit who sincerely believes that he's a dog. That lack of empathy and inability to grasp the gravitas of that issue for a lot of people is a sign that you really do focus on the first part of that verse and not the latter. But
I'd like to address that. One of the things I think you'll note in my fallible approach to trying to reach people with the gospel is I do want to try to demonstrate a level of respect and love, and I'll even tell people as I talk to them who are atheists that say we're just stardust, I'll say I don't I don't accept that about you. You're not that low as just stardust. So I want to try to be consistent with my commitments to say, no, I see you as greater, as better, as having more meaning, more dignity, more value than you give yourself.
Right.
Now, I know I have failings as a sinner before God, and again, if I ever have failings, I want to make sure I confess those, and I want to grow even as a believer. But in terms of his example of the transgender video, you and I were talking about this over lunch.
Right.
It's interesting, when the whole issue with Bruce Jenner came up and also with Rachel Dolezal came up, you have two incidents that came up very close in proximity towards one another. One is a man who mutilated his body, a grandfather who mutilated his body and pretended to be a woman, and everyone's saying, well, that's a woman. Another one was a white woman who was pretending to be a black woman. And so we want to answer the fool according to their folly. And so the question was in the video, approaching the culture in a way to say, okay, now let's be consistent now. If a grandfather can mutilate his body and dress like a woman, does it make him a woman? Well, sure. How about if a woman who's white says that she's black? Is she black? Well, no. How about if a man dresses like a dog? Is he a dog? They'll say, oh, that's ridiculous. You're not Puddles. You're not Puddles. You're not a dog. You're a man. What's interesting here is almost a moment, James, that was prophetic in that video. Was we threw out a wild example in that video while we were on the street. I said, ask people if I was a 50-year-old man, could I, and I wanted to be, I thought I was a 6-year-old little girl, could I do that? I said, let's make it as crazy as possible. We got a dog, let's do that. As soon as he asked the question, people are like, no, not a 6-year-old girl. And the amazing thing is as this video comes out with Noah challenging us on the video, that very thing is in our news feed right now.
Constant.
So it
gotten hit with it 6, 7, 8
far
times.
from being a mean-spirited attack upon that worldview, that's the very thing we're seeing in front of us today.
And we got mentioned there is, if you haven't seen it, it's all over Facebook. But there is a video, and it's a serious, not this isn't made up. This guy has been applauded by the LGBT, especially the T part of that community. And he has 7 kids, 6 or 7?
7 kids.
7 kids.
7 kids.
In his 50s.
Yeah.
And he dresses like a little girl and pretends to be a 6-year-old little girl.
Pacifier.
With a pacifier.
With a pacifier.
6-year-old.
He's been adopted by an older couple that lets him live with them as a 6-year-old little girl.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't get that far.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah.
So when Noah says, you're demeaning to them, and you're not really understanding their experience in a way.
You're not empathetic.
As a matter of fact, we are just showing the results of the worldview. Now, somebody